Okay, it says that I am live, and since I'm out here without a producer and the equipment has been doing some weird stuff with snow going on all around the world, I would really like it if somebody could hit the chat and just type in a yes, we can hear you, or an in if you can't. I'm going, no, you're lying if you're pressing in. Donna, you might have to send me something. Can you hear me? Type that to her. Need to get off to kind of a rough start here, but we'll try to make it up to everybody. It looks to me like everything is working properly, but I have confirmation. And so I will start my timer as I happen to remember that this time. Timer is timing. Okay, now I have to get the thing. No, we're not in chapters 27. Oh, yeah. So today we begin with vaYiqra, chapter 26, verse 28. And that's, of course, Leviticus is what it's called in English. So Leviticus 26, 28. So I'm going to back up a little bit like I always do. I always back up and do the previous verse to kind of worm my way into this verse, especially at this point. Verse 26 said, when I have broken the staff of your bread, remember this is God speaking, and he's telling us what is going to happen to us if we continue not to live according to his law. And sorry. And if you remember, I knew I shouldn't have taken a swig. Let's see, make sure we cover that up. So I'm not advertising for anyone. Totally forgot what I was saying. Oh, so if you recall, there was a list of a few things. Like if you break God's covenant, first thing that happens is terrors, disease, fever, eyes failing, soul pining away, sowing in vain, planting food in vain, enemies eating your crops when they do come up, which is probably why you're planting in vain. Yahweh's face against us, which means we've turned our back to him, not that he's turned his face against us. Yahweh strikes us before our enemy. In other words, everyone's going to know that we've been sinning because things aren't going well for us. Our enemies who hate us will rule over us. We will run from our own shadow. And that was just level 1. Then 7 times worse than that, if we continue in the sin, lack of rain, the dirt will be bad. In other words, it won't have enough nutrients in it for it to do what it should do to bring forth food. No fruit from the fruit trees. And remember, that didn't mean that absolutely no fruit would come from the fruit trees. What it means is no abundance. We're coming off something previous that told us about all of this abundance that would come our way if we do things right. But if we're doing things wrong, the abundance goes away. So when they say no fruit from the tree, God wasn't saying, I should say this, biblical Hebrew is a very different language than English. We don't say things over and over and over again unless we are trying to add emphasis. So once God or Jew or anyone says this in Hebrew, once they say something like your fruit trees will overflow with abundance, then if we turn around on the opposite side and say, but if you don't do this and you break these rules, no fruit will come your way. You should know, if you speak Hebrew, that does not mean that no fruit will go from the tree. That's the way we would take that in English, right? In Hebrew, that means that no abundance will come your way. Okay, I don't know that I remember to say that earlier on, but now we're in the second level, and then at this point in 26, we hit the third level of 7 times more punishment than the time before. Now, none of these punishments lead to death up until we got to the one just previous to where we are now. So verse 28, this is my translation of the Hebrew text. And I will walk among you in furious opposition. See, we pushed it to the point where when God says it's furious opposition, that's not God throwing lightning bolts and throwing, stones from outer space and blowing up Sodom and Gomorrah and stuff like that. God didn't throw those stones in the first place. That's part of what happens in the universe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, somewhere in the universe. That's happening all over. Just look at the moon. You wonder where those pot marks came from? It's there to help protect us from getting hit so often. So, that's not God's anger. I know that's how the English translations read, but the Hebrew doesn't read like that at all, because God's nothing like that. When the Bible says God is love, and it does, this is pure, unadulterated love. But God's form of love also comes with hate. God said it, the one I loved, the other I hated. That's a tire shop over there blowing up tires to get air in them or something. They're not a tire shop, but they fix their own tires, and they've been doing that a lot lately. So anyway, the furious opposition, unless that was God throwing a lightning bolt, the furious opposition, though, means that he's furious with his people. Why are you continuing in this sin? You made a covenant with me. You promised that you would do these things, and I could be giving you all of this abundance. And now I can't do anything for you, because when you turn your back on God, when God is against you, you have turned your back to him. So when God is against you, obviously he is now furious because you don't have any protection. And the whole point in God making a covenant with mankind in the first place was because he wanted to take care of the people he created and loves. So he'll walk. He's not leaving. I mean, think about all the stuff that happened to Job. I mean, others call him Job, but his name was Job. And sometimes it was pronounced Eov. It depends on how you use it in a sentence. See, that's another thing people don't know. If you're reading if you're reading the original Greek or Hebrew text of the Bible, and I'm of course including the New and the Old when I say this, if in that letter, one, if there's commas and periods and question marks and stuff like that, you're not reading an original. That's a translation. But, oh man, what was I going to tell you guys? It just jumped out of my head. Oh, darn. Oh, if the names are spelled the same exact way every time you're reading a translation, it is not an original. Okay. And so if you find this really good deal, like say on the King James, an original 1611 King James, if it says King James Bible on it, it's not real. King James forbid his name to be put on that. So anyone trying to sell you $1 million King James, it actually says King James on it, you should pass. Just saying. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff like that people think they're reading the original, and no, they're not. Because for one thing, there is no original Hebrew text for what the people call the Old Testament, and there is no original text for what people call the New. None. But we can tell you this. Those of us who have actually studied it and not, uh, the atheists that run around talking about how stupid it is and how stupid people are to believe in it. They've not studied it if they talk that way. We have the English Bible, the King James and the others that have come since then were translated from the Hebrew text comes from something called the Masoretic text. Now, back here a few years back, 60, 70 years ago, when it actually was first found, there was this thing called the Dead Sea Scrolls. They contain a version of the Hebrew Bible that is 1,000 years older than the Masoretic text from which the English Bibles have been translated, right? They're almost identical. The only differences that you find is that among the Hebrews in the different regions and the different cultures, because of, there's a Hebrew culture in Spain that differs from the Hebrew culture in America. They're different from the Russian Hebrew culture. We all spell certain names in different ways, and we all know that the other one does this. We know how it's supposed to be spelled, but we make changes. For instance, Antiochus Epiphany. That in Greek means God manifest. Well, if we say Antiochus Epiphanani, then that's Antiochus the crazy man. See, we do things like that. Those are the only differences that they actually could find. There were occasionally, for instance, the Book of Psalm, there were, I think, there were either 5 more Psalms that don't show up in the Masoretic, or it was 5 more chapters of Psalms, but I think it was 5, just 5 more Psalms. And they're 1,000 years older than the Masoretic, so they're likely real. But what that does is tell those of us who've spent the time studying this stuff and can read these things for ourselves, is that what we have is reliable. When you find something 1,000 years older than the thing you already had and they're identical, this is good information. Now, when it comes to the New Testament letters, there's people that say, oh no, those things weren't written until the 3rd and 4th century, and some will push it back to the 2nd century, and then some will push it, of course I'm talking CE here, and then some try to push it all the way into the 1st century, and boy, do they have to do some mental gymnastics to get that to happen. They're right, they were. What we have are fragments of things that come from very late 2nd century, mostly 3rd century, and then by the time you get to the 4th century, or is it the 5th? I think it's the 4th century. They're not even reliable. It's just junk. The interesting thing is you don't have anything 1,000 years old to compare that to, right? But here's the thing that's so interesting. One, we know that they were written anywhere from well over 100 and say 50 years to 350 years after the fact, right? And so you say, well, how can you know those are reliable? Well, you tell me how somebody who's not Jewish, does not speak the Hebrew language, doesn't know the history, the customs, the culture, the typology, the curvature of the land, typology, they don't even know that, right? How in the world did those people in those other countries that because they were not written in Israel, how did those people know all of that information? How could they be dead on accurate on every single thing that they said when it came to custom, culture, history, typology, talking about the layout of the land? How could Josephus know that things were there that were not found until circa 1950? 1950. Some of us here are old enough to have been there. Maybe not remember it so well, but old enough to have been there, right? That's our lifetime. If you're listening into this and seeing me, that's our lifetime. Maybe you were born later. Whoa, right on all this stuff. At least it didn't leak too much. Even if you weren't born until, let's see, you have the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 20s, whatever those are called, the 2000s all the way into the 2000s. That's our generation. And in this generation, we found, 50 things that Josephus said existed, that everybody said that you couldn't trust Josephus because he kept saying all this stuff and there was no proof of it. And we found it in the last 50 years, all of it. Yeah. This stuff can be trusted. There's guys that have written books about that and show you why it can be trusted. And they go into great detail. If you guys want to know what those books are, let me know, and I'll try to bring a list next week if I can. If there were, I think they are. My wife can give me the list because I'm not at home. I can't just run over there and grab my books like I usually do. So anyway, God's saying, and I will walk among you in furious opposition. Remember? So it's not God throwing lightning bolts. God is furious because, you know how when someone hurts you really bad, you just almost have to be angry so that you don't cry. I don't know. Maybe it's more on those lines than it is him throwing lightning bolts. And he goes on, and I will discipline you 7 times more. We've already gone through the first set of 7. 7 times worse than the sin you've committed, number 1. Then 7 times worse than that one, number 2. 7 times worse than that one, number 3. And now 7 times in that one, number 4. According to your Torah rebellions. Now, this is something I haven't said in until now. I'm going to say it. According to your Torah rebellion. 7 times worse according to your Torah rebellion. So if everybody around you is committing all of this Torah rebellion, they're going to be punished all of those 7 times 7 more according to their Torah rebellion. So what happens if you don't commit any? Well, probably 1, your back isn't turned to God. And if your back's not turned to God, his face isn't against you. If his face isn't against you, his fury isn't over you. And if you're punished according to your Torah rebellion and you have committed none, then are you punished? Say it with me. No. Will it affect you? Yeah. Yeah, it will. Because if your punishment gets to the point where your enemy, because this is what happened last week, your enemy is literally killing your sons and your daughters, well, you could be killed with them, but you're not being punished for your sin. That's an issue that I don't think most people get. We're not being punished for the sins of our forefathers. We're punished for our sins, according to our sins. But if the nation breaks that covenant, which is where all of those 7 times 7, that's what is in between the nation fully breaking the covenant between them and God. Because God is slow to anger. He is slow to wrath. He is slow to punishment. He is giving you time and time again, he's giving the nation, the followers of God, his children, the opportunity to set it right. And remember last week I said, it's just like flipping a light switch. It is that easy. We haven't gotten there yet. So even though we're not being punished for our sin, that doesn't mean we won't wind up in a gas chamber. You follow what I'm saying? There's two ways that the Holocaust could have taken place. And this is where it starts to hurt. One, we broke it and we're punished 7 times for that. We broke it even so, and we were punished 7 times more for that. And we kept breaking it, and 7 times 7 more. And then we kept breaking it. And eventually there is no covenant. There is no covering. There is no protection. There is no abundance. There is no relationship with God. And just because as a whole, as a nation, they're bringing everybody else down, that doesn't mean we have to act like them. That doesn't mean we have to start sinning because there's no hope for us, because there is hope for us. The person who makes it to the end of what? The end of whatever you face. That's the one who makes it. Whether we make it because we broke all of those laws of God and we wound up in there because of that broken covenant, that could have caused it. And then there's the other thing that can cause it. Maybe some crazy, wild-haired, big mouth, loud mouth, narcissist murderer decided to set up camps and kill people. Life happens. You don't get a cold because you did something that displeased God. You don't get in a car wreck because